Today is National Coming Out Day.
You're a 2-time celebrity of this day.
I'm not a fan of this day.
Yeah? Why?
I don't know, I really struggle with... I understand the purpose behind. It's like an acknowledgement. There's supposed to be pride behind it all. I do. Sometimes I feel like these days get lost, and it's just like a celebrate National Coming Out. Like it's a thing to celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
And for somebody who's been through that twice, almost like a decade apart from each other, you know, it's something I wish I didn't have to celebrate. And it's something I have to do multiple times sometimes, but every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we think that coming out just means revealing yourself to the world, and the fact that we even have to reveal ourselves to the world speaks to just the norms that we are supposed to assimilate to. And when we don't assimilate to that, then we have to communicate that to the rest of the world in some big to-do, you know?
Right.
You know?
Right. What do you think it would be like if there was no coming out? What would that look like, and how would that change things if there wasn't a need?
I think there'd be a lot less suffering. At least specifically, like if I can think back and maybe, I don't know, maybe reflecting on my experiences would be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
To explain why. I know some families are great, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I knew the whole time, you know, come on in. But I think what goes unspoken is the stress and the tension that nobody sees about the turmoil, the inner conflict that people experience prior to coming out, regardless of how somebody responds to that in the moment. And so like when I came out the first time, you know, I was just going to tell my parents that I was gay and that I like girls.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, that they already knew. They pulled me out of school my freshman year because of that. And so it's on Easter Sunday, by the way. I'm very ironic with the days that just I happen to like come out. It's just
I love
interesting.
You for that.
I'll get to round 2 here in a minute.
Uh-huh.
But I remember just, you know, sitting there at the table, and it was like I couldn't say the words. I couldn't say the word lesbian. There's such homophobia. There's such internal homophobia associated with that word because of the messages that everybody sends. And it's like when you can't say that word, then you must really not be. Like I remember that being this huge message that was sent. Like if I couldn't say the words, then that means that it must be a phase, or that it's not really true, or that it's just something I'm struggling with.
Wow.
And so, you know, we talk about like religious trauma, and so the Bible being used to say that I'm lovable no matter what, in spite of all of these things. So there's this constant message sent that I love you no matter what. But it's saying, what that's communicating is I love you even though you have all of these things that are wrong with you over here. And, you know, so a decade goes by and that's what I'm dealing with. I'm happy, you know, that it feels right. There's nothing, despite the multiple times that I'm told that if I'm struggling with things, maybe it's because of this internal conflict. You know, I was told once that I had, like, I deal with, like, stomach issues, GI issues. Like, my stomach has always, from a very early age, you know, been a mess. And I was told in middle adulthood that maybe that's because of, you know, it's this internal conflict. If it's this, like, physical manifestation of the fact that I like girls, you know? And that I don't fit like this heterosexual or heteronormative lifestyle. So anyway, I mean, fast forward, that's the easy one. You know, it didn't seem easy in the moment, but in hindsight, I think that that's the easy one. That's the, and that's not to diminish anybody's. That's not to diminish anybody's experience that they have with that right now, because I'm just saying in comparison to how I have to come out now. And I say have to come out, it's not a choice. I have to come out if I want to be authentic and true to myself. So I have to say that to make it like feel right. There's like I don't know, when I say I have to, it's an intentional intention to use that word.
You think it's because the word choice has been thrown out so much?
Oh yeah, because we're told it's a choice. You know, it's a choice to choose your gender. It's a gender. It's a choice to choose your sexuality. It's a choice to choose all of these things. And so when I say I have to come out and I have to out myself and I have to identify myself, it's the world that's making me have to do that. It's not internal because I'm choosing to do this. The way the world is set up is requiring me to out myself. But that's the conflict that shows up, is like I have to say I have to, but there's no I have to. It's intentional to use that language. But the second coming out, it's like the second coming. Isn't that funny? It's like, I don't know. It's like the second coming out. I call it coming out 2.0. I remember you reading like the draft that I had written. But this was different. This was coming out in a way that a lot of people did not understand, and is new to people. So it's not just coming out into this identity that people may or may not agree with, but they understand and it makes sense to them. You know, they can see that when I'm coming out as not identifying as a gender, and not identifying as a binary gender.
Right.
And whatever word that I choose, whether it's non-binary, whether it's agender, whether it's genderqueer, whether it's trans, like, you know, it can vary from day to day what that feels like. And that's something that not a lot of people have experienced. And you can rationalize, I think, in a lot of people's minds, whether they agree with it or disagree with it, physical attraction to another person. They cannot rationalize in their brain not having a gender. Right. Or not having a binary gender, in the sense where we've been raised and boys like this and girls like this and girls act this way and boys act this way, and even breaking out of those behavioral norms into something that just does not exist. It doesn't, it is, it's scary.
It's scary to you to come out and to tell people that, or it's scary to others?
I think both.
When they
I think that's where a lot of hate comes from, if that's fair. Is when we see hate, it's coming from fear of something they don't understand. And unfortunately we have to, hate things that we don't understand or are scared of.
It's crazy.
But I think for me, yeah, there's definitely fear associated with that, knowing acts of violence, and I know that I have the privilege of having white skin, and that protects me from a lot. And I also have the ability to pass as just a woman, or a woman, honestly, if I really wanted to, especially with like longer hair. It wasn't that way when my hair was short. But it's much more acceptable to be gay in most parts of our society than it is to be trans. And the second you say something about gender, it's this whole added element of phobia, that is attached to that. At least in my experience. I don't want to diminish anybody else's experience, but when you are constantly hearing stories about trans people being murdered, not just accidents, but being killed for who they actually are. We've been walking down the street together, and I've like dropped your hand. There have been like physical changes that have happened over the past year. With like the depth of my voice, and there are other changes that are going to come too that I will not be able to hide, and that should I have to hide. And when you have to hide something to potentially save your life, it does get scary.
Yeah, definitely.
And so you're sitting with that choice of, do I come out, which is something we're supposed to be celebrating today, right? Or do I hide to protect myself? And so when you're sitting here celebrating a National Coming Out Day, you cannot erase the fact that a lot of people aren't out, because if they were to come out, they'd die.
And sometimes for you too, even though you're out to your friends and family, like sometimes you can't, out yourself. It's not like
Right.
it. Like I know you've mentioned that it's not a one-time thing. It's something you have to do over and over and over again.
It's every interaction. I think for every, especially stranger that I meet, I would say 95% of the time, and I don't have any data to support that, I'm somebody's introduction into something non-binary, somebody existing, and even the fact that it can exist, and that gender is a social construct. And it's interesting. I read something online today that a fellow queer person had posted, and it said, when we correct people and error correct people for like whatever name we use or whatever pronouns or language, to take that correction with a sense of gratitude and a gift, because that's us saying that we want to continue some sort of relationship, that you're important enough that I want to continue a relationship that's authentic with you. If I don't correct you, and it's true, it's because there's no future for a relationship, and I don't see one valuable enough to waste the time to out myself to you.
Right. Yeah. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah. It's nice to give that up, though, to not have to put that labor on myself,
Definitely.
Yeah.
If somebody came to you and said, well, you've experienced this, what advice would you give to a young person who needs to come out to somebody, their family or something?
That's a loaded question. That's a really hard question.
Yeah.
Self-compassion is something that I always try to help them understand, is that, you don't always have to go in a timetable. There's a sense of urgency, and I 100% get that. But is that if it doesn't go the way that you want, and don't have expectations, is really, really hard as well too, is don't have expectations that somebody's going to open their arms. And that's building a network. I mean, I am so grateful for the people, you being one of them, that I reached out to starting this whole journey. And without that, it wouldn't have happened, So building a network, to what degree you can, again, there's an immense amount of privilege that comes with the fact that I can say that.
Right. And I imagine there's some amount of coming out that has to come before that, right? Because you have to put yourself in spaces where you're going to be able to build a network. And so you may not have to come out to family or friends, but
Yeah.
even if it's privately online, and that the secrecy is filled with shame to have to go that route, but some people do.
That's the self-compassion part, and the shame, and to acknowledge that shame, to I don't want to say own it, that doesn't feel right, but to know that that's a part of it, and to know that where that shame comes from is not your own fault. You were born into a world that has erased people of your community. Go back, learn the history, learn what existed centuries ago, and the beautiful gender expansive societies that especially Indigenous people had. I think that has been so validating for me, is to learn all of that. The people like me existed prior to that. Love yourself. How about that? If I define pride is unapologetic self-love, and so find some pride in whatever small fraction you can find it in this tragedy of a world we have right now. There's beauty everywhere, you just have to find it.
I think the queer community has a special gift for doing that, what makes it so beautiful.